Okay, so the other day, I was threading some stuff on my Grizzly lathe, and this has been, 6 weeks ago or so. I was threading a breech plug, um, and it was metric thread, so I was leaving the carriage engaged in the feed setting and backing out, um, stopping the lathe at the end of the thread, backing it out, running the lathe in reverse, out past the part, feeding in, engaging it into forward again, and dialing into a new depth and making the cut, just kind of all that fun stuff that you deal with metric threads with the Grizzly lathe. And what happened was I got the thread pretty much cut. I was threaded the right distance and the right depth, everything. Measured over wires. The thread was coming out good, and I had a small threaded section, or a small hex section for threading it into the breech of the gun. It's a white muzzle loader, or not a white. It was a Austin Halleck muzzle loader, and they use a metric thread on the breech plug. So I was going to polish that little section up with a little bit of emery cloth, and so I threw the lathe at a low speed, kicked it into high speed, and I was running it around, I think, 1400 RPMs, and kicked it on, forgot to disengage my thread lever. And so, of course, the carriage starts to fly towards the chuck and the headstock, and I see that handle cranking around. My first impulse was to reach down and grab that handle. And in doing so, and I've straightened this tooth out some. You can see that tooth right there, top dead center, just to the left of it, how narrow of a gap that is compared with everything else. And it was bent quite a bit over there, to the left. And I've taken a pin punch around it. When this gear is not hard, you can scratch it with a file easily. And I'm trying to bend that back as good as I can. I've got it relatively close, and I think this would run just fine if I cleaned that groove up a little bit with a file, maybe tap that tooth over just a little bit more. And you can see where I grabbed this thing in the vise right there. Of course, on the other side, to try and tap that tooth over with the pin punch. And like I say, I think it's close enough it would run just fine. This is the pinion gear that rides on the gear rack that controls the feed, left and right toward the tailstock or the headstock. So I ordered a new gear from Grizzly when I first looked under there and saw that was bent like it was, and I knew there was no way to repair it without pulling it out of the lathe. And I ordered that about 6 weeks ago. I just got a card from them about a week ago that said the part's still on back order. And so I started looking at it and thought, you know what, I can probably cut that gear. I don't have a gear cutter, but I bet you I could grind a single point cutting tooth that would fit in there close enough that for what this does, it's not a gear train that runs at high speed or runs continually or anything like that. It's just a pinion riding on a rack that's just moving the carriage left and right. So what I did is I turned this blank here, got it all polished up, and then I thought, I didn't polish, this end where the gear will be cut. Just polished the shaft so it would fit in the bearing smooth and not eat that up. But I made several attempts. Just reach over and grab this here at a profile tool. Just trying to freehand this thing in on the grinder and see if we can focus on it. There we go, a little bit maybe. Anyhow, I was having a devil of a time trying to get that thing ground in there. Let's see if you can see it here. You can see the left side's got a lot more gradual radius than the right side. The right side fits in the tooth pretty good. The problem is my grinding wheel has kind of a rounded edge on it, and I could not turn that thing in there to get the left side to match that right side radius. I've ground this thing off and started over, I'll bet you 5 to 10 times. Tried a little rounded cutter in my Dremel tool. Tried the same thing. Just wasn't happy with it. And that would probably, realistically for what this is, it would probably fit in there and work fine. So I started digging onto the internet looking for, form tools for cutting gears, and stumbled onto an article written by John Stevenson, and I stumbled onto this by watching another video, and I should credit whoever did the video. I can't remember who it was, where you make a tool that's got a couple of buttons on it, and so the cutting tool would be like that with a notch back into here. To plunge in and make a involute gear cutter. I'm going to approach this a little bit different way with a single point form tool instead of this button tool here. I'm going to make a single point form tool. With the proper radius in it, and we'll come in and cut one side of the gear cutter and then move it over to the other side. Cut the other side of the gear cutter, so when we're finished, we'll have a gear cutter with the proper shape. Where I just need one of these, and it's just got to be really close. I figured this was a better option for me than spending the time to make the button tool, because I'll probably never build another gear cutter of that same shape. So the button tool seemed like a lot of wasted time. And then also with cutting on that form with both of these buttons at the same time, you've got a lot of surface area you're cutting as you plunge that in. So you're going to get a potential for quite a bit of chatter, and basically essentially making a mess. So what I've done, we're going to walk across the dirty floor over here to the left. Oh, let's go back to the paper. I wanted to go over these dimensions with you. On this on this website, and I believe it's Metal Web News. And then what I searched for was involute gear cutter, making a cutter to cut involute gears or something to that effect was what I searched for. And there's a table. I'm going to try and stick a couple of pictures of this table into the video so you can see where I got these numbers from. But as you go down the table, it gives you a column for the pitch of the gear, which I didn't write down. Then it gives you some multipliers, essentially, or numbers that you're gonna multiply and divide. Pin diameter for a 16 pitch, 20-degree pressure angle. The pin diameter, the factor is 4.1. The center between the two pins, here to here, factor is 5.267. The infeed, the depth of the cut is 2.251. And these are all just numbers. These are just factors. And then the width of the cutter is a 4. So according to this article that I read, you're going to take the pin diameter, which is a 4.10. You're going to divide it by the pitch of the gear, which is 13 teeth. That comes out to 315 on the pin diameter. And then the pin centers, you take this number up here, the 5.267, divide it by 13, come out with 405 between, or center to center on the pins. The infeed depth is 2.251, which comes from that table. Divide that by 13, you get a depth of cut of 173 thousandths. And then the width of the cutter, that factor was a 4 up here. So 4 divided by 13 is 307. So just a little under 3/8 wide, about 5/16-ish. And then, so if you take the centers of the pins, which is 405, divide out the diameter of the pins, which is 315, you're going to add half of 315 here, half of 315 here, gives you a difference of 90 thousandths.